Okay, folks, we're going to get started here. Just one more quick announcement for anybody in either my 498D or 476 sections. If you want to sign in, there's a student here. He's just taken a seat in the England jersey. If you want to sign in with him afterward, that'd be great. But to everybody, good evening and welcome to tonight's Curley Center Conversation with Marc Spears. This event is part of a year-long university-wide roundtable of sports-interested faculty and schools and departments. This year's theme of the roundtable is race and sports, and that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. I just want to tell you a little bit about Marc himself. Marc grew up in San Jose and graduated from San Jose State, where he played basketball, the game he now covers and has for 17 of his 21 years in professional journalism. Marc has really a star-studded resume, and so I won't take up our hour plus here listing it all, but just to give you a few of the highlights. He's been the beat reporter on the Denver Nuggets beat for the Denver Post. He's been the Celtics beat reporter for the Boston Globe, covered them when they last won their last title. He's covered the Beijing Olympics, and in 2009 joined Yahoo Sports as the national NBA writer. How plugged in is Marc? Last night when I picked him up and we were standing at baggage claim, he was texting with Steph Curry, just sort of casually. So that's a good beat writer. That's a well-sourced beat writer. He is also the chair of the National Association of Black Journalists Task Force on Sports. And so I thought how we would start tonight is, as we often do with these kinds of conversations, Marc's going to tell you a little bit about what's on his mind for 10, 15 minutes or so. I'm going to ask him some questions, and while that's going on, you can formulate your own questions, and then we'll turn it over to the audience for a Q&A. And so that's the way we're going to go. Let's please welcome Marc Spears.
Well, thank you all, first of all, for having me. It's an extreme honor to be here. This is the school I couldn't get in, come out of high school, so now I can say I went to Penn State for a day, so I feel good right now. So the topic is race and sports, and he wants us to talk about race and sports. I guess we should talk about race and sports. I'll tell you what, when I was born, it's funny that race is even an issue, because when I was born, nobody asked me what color did I want to be. When I was born in 72, I was a Negro. In the 80s, I was black. And all of a sudden, 10 years ago, I'm African American. So it's kind of, I guess, evolved as a people through that. And I was joking, guys. I think how one feels about race is all mutually exclusive. I come from a family who certainly was affected. My mother grew up in New Orleans, had a 3.8 GPA, was trying to get to Dillard University out of high school, and was just shy of getting a full scholarship. Family couldn't afford it, and at that time, none of the white schools allowed her to go to nursing school in Louisiana. She tried to go through a nursing program through a high school through her priest, and the nun who ran the program of this Catholic program, nursing program, denied her because she was black. She then went to St. Louis, moved in with her aunt, and went to a all-black nursing school where she met my father, had me, eventually ended up getting a job at Stanford Hospital, and 40 years later, she ends up coming back to New Orleans. 30 years later, she goes back to New Orleans and gets a job at a hospital where in the office, she later found out, the same office in which the nun turned her down to go to nursing school ended up being her office. And she broke down and cried when she found this out. And it's amazing. My mom says, has never had a racist bone in her body. She said, God always figures it out, always finds a way. And so that's kind of something that stuck with me. My dad, even in the early 2000s, he won a racism lawsuit against General Motors, in which he was training fellow white co-workers to do a job similar to his, and then they would always get promoted over him. And he ended up winning a lawsuit. So these were things stories I were told, things I saw as a child. Actually, but growing up in San Jose, I dealt with more from race, not from the white people, mostly were the people that took care of me or looked out for me. I dealt with a lot of, San Jose was probably one of the most diverse cities you will ever go to, still is. There was a Filipino girl I dated. Her dad wouldn't let her date me because I was black. Stopped that. One time I went and bought a soda from a Vietnamese vendor. He came back with and gave me a cup with a top on it, and it was hot, and it ended up being a cup of urine that he gave me. I had a coach Mexican high school basketball coach who only liked black people because for one reason, because he thought they were good in basketball and they could be a good use for him on the team. Slapped me in my face in practice. So I say all this to say that it was kind of through my family, for me, stuff I went through, race was always an issue. But through my whole career, whether it was getting a job in Tulsa, Oklahoma, whether it was a one-armed man, white man who, when I struggled with my writing, worked with me twice a week, whether it's, the majority of the people that have helped me get to where I am today have been white males. And that being said, unfortunately, when you look at the statistics as to how sports and journalism is today, and I'll read you a couple statistics from Richard Lapchick, who is from the Director of Diversity and Ethics in Sports. 91% of today's sports editors 2 years ago were white, 90% of associate sports editors, 83% of columnists, 83% of copy editors were white. For women, it's the worst. In every category, it might be tough for black people. For women, it's even worse. In every category, as far as sports and journalism, it's rated F. There's actually now the AP Sports Editors Group. The president is actually a woman from ESPN named Mary Byrne. But for the most part, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to high positions, it's predominantly a white male environment, and it hasn't changed. Why is that? So perhaps some of it might be racism. Myself being chair of the National Association of Black Journalists Sports Task Force, which basically is I'm chair of a group that in the NABJ that includes all the black sports journalists in the country. I think a lot of times, because I talk to a lot of these sports editors, they just don't know. Some of them don't even try. They say they don't know anybody to reach out. I'm like, I'll get you 5 qualified people. And I never once put a gun to their head and say, you have to hire somebody black, or you have to hire a woman, but I'll put names in front of them where they can't say that there weren't qualified people available, because oftentimes that's the excuse I get. Other times, I think people hire people who are their friends or in their circle or they're comfortable with. So if the majority of the people that are making decisions are white males, coincidentally, there could be a lot of white males that follow. And it doesn't oftentimes mean that they're racist. They're just perhaps picking people in their circle. So hopefully with my position with the NABJ, we could do a lot better. We're trying to do our best as far as, putting great candidates in front of people of color that people can hire, and to try to change the numbers. But in a lot of ways too, to self-check, I think that there needs to be more people of color that it seems like a lot of my colleagues want to be in front of the camera, want to have their name on the story like me. If I could go back in time, I'd probably start over and be a sports editor. Or, there needs to be more people of color and women that want to be station managers, general managers, sports editors. And to me, that's another way that the numbers can be changed. I got to meet 2 women at lunch today. Are they here right now? Either one of them? Can you stand up real quick? They really, thank you. They really, no, they really made my heart today at lunch because they said they want to be behind the scenes. And I was like, great, great, great. There was a woman I mentor. She's actually, speaking of Stephen Curley, it's his cousin. Beautiful girl. And she's like, everybody's trying to get me in front of the camera, but I want to be a producer. I said, you be a producer. And so I think in a lot of ways that is how numbers can change as well. In the sports journalism world is if there's more people of color and women behind the scenes, rather than just us wanting to, hey, I'm at the game and this is what's going on. I'm the one writing the story. The more people behind the scenes, I think, not only does it change the color, I think we get better stories, more balanced stories. People can understand, well, why would somebody black be offended by, it's Chinese New Year and it's the year of the monkey, and Sacramento Kings forward, DeMarcus Cousins wants them to take those shirts off to, not pass out those shirts the first day of Black History Month. It's good to have somebody that can actually explain it to you. So that's why I think diversity matters. And hopefully, in time, and the numbers aren't getting better, they're kind of getting worse. Hopefully it changes, but it certainly seems like there's still a long road ahead.
Thanks, Mark. So I've got a bunch of questions for you, and I'm sure we'll have some questions from the audience, but let me just ask you about your day-to-day life a little bit. You're in a situation that's interesting in your sport, in the NBA, because we're in a situation where you've got a league that on the floor it's majority black, but in the boardroom, in the front office, it's majority white.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in a couple of, I guess, sort of a two-part question. First of all, how do you see, is there a racial tension in the league? Yeah. And how do you negotiate that as a reporter? How do you get in front of people and make both sides feel like you're somebody they can trust and you're somebody they can talk to?
Well, first of all, I got to be a reporter first, and I got to be objective. But when something seems blatant, I have no problems pointing it out. Stephen A. Smith's credit at ESPN last week on the air, he pointed out that there was a job open with the New Jersey Nets, that they hired a general manager named Sean Marks, who perhaps has 2 or 3 years of front office experience, and was hired. And he's actually from New Zealand. And there were about 8 guys that were interviewed for this job, to be the general manager of the Nets. And the previous general manager was black. But of the 8 people that were interviewed, not one was black. There was one Hispanic guy that was interviewed. And Stephen A. basically went on an understandable rant where he said, there needs to be a Rooney Rule, which is basically a rule in which if a job like that opens up, that at least they bring some people of color in to interview for the job, which I wholeheartedly believe, and I echoed his sentiments in a couple of tweets, and I got some ugly tweets back, which is understandable on Twitter. I don't get offended on it. I come from a background where when I worked at the LA Daily News, I got a phone call from the KKK once.
How'd that go?
Luckily, I didn't pick up the phone, but I wrote a story about Cal State Northridge not interviewing any black candidates for their football job. And the next morning I came in and the secretary said, hey, you got a phone call from the Ku Klux Klan. I said, really? And I said, what did they say? She said, you don't want to know. I erased it. So I to this day don't know what they said. I've had people call me nigger on Twitter, you know, and phone calls when I was at Louisville. I had a guy in Louisville once say, I gave him a card. He's like, there's no way that you're a sports writer there. They wouldn't hire any of you people to be sports writers, you know. So my skin is so thick from things that I've heard that, you know, any kind of backlash on Twitter doesn't follow me. In fact, Marc, owner of the Mavericks, he once told me that if somebody doesn't have that many followers, then the only way they have a voice is if you respond or you retweet them. So that's something I always think about. But, you know, there's always going to be opinions, there's always going to be ignorance, there's always going to be people that don't understand. So there were people coming back at me saying, well, you saying that there's certain guys that should be interviewed because they're black, he's racist, and this and that. And I said, resumes don't lie. Bring the resumes out. And since then, there has been a couple columns about it that have been actually from black reporters, but nobody else, any other journalists have really said anything. So, you know, I've had several of those candidates call me and say, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad somebody is finally saying something.
We talked a little bit earlier about the fact that you were reporting on the Donald Sterling situation with the Clippers. Sterling being the former owner of the Clippers, who was caught on tape basically just on making a terrible racial diatribe. And I'm just wondering what your observations were as you reported on that, your observations of the press, of how the league and the players responded to that.
You know, I remember that like it was yesterday. I mean, it was a couple years ago where you know, Donald Sterling, owner of the Clippers, has a long history of racism issues, whether it's blacks or Hispanics, with housing. He once went into the Clippers locker room with some friends while the players were changing and said, look at these black bodies, these beautiful black bodies, which a lot of players were offended by. And behind the scenes, there certainly were a lot of racism things, and it came to the forefront with this tape that came out during a first round series 3 years ago between the Warriors and the Clippers. And I remember like it was yesterday going to practice, the Clippers practice at the University of San Francisco. And mind you, the head coach of the team is black, Doc Rivers. He's also the president now. They had stars that were black, and Chris Paul, DeAndre Jordan, and Blake Griffin. But the thing that kind of surprised me is, like, and maybe it's a different generation, maybe, but when it came to talking to the media, I heard that, you know, Matt Barnes and DeAndre Jordan really wanted to say something. They were upset, and that management kind of talked them out of it, and so they gave some PC remark, which to me, it was an opportunity for a predominantly black team to really have a stance against their owner. And I talked to one of the players, and I was like, why are you guys going to play? Why would you play for an owner who would say such a thing? And he said, well, what if we win a championship? He said, if we win a championship, we could get the trophy, all of us, and stand up and hold the trophy up and be triumphant, and we could win in the end. I said, yeah, but his wife would be holding the trophy because the owners get the trophy. He was like, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way. I asked Chris Paul's from North Carolina, like, how do your parents feel about this? How do your grandparents feel about this? And, well, they don't, you know, I don't know if he was being truthful with me, but he said that they didn't have a problem with him still playing for an owner who made those kind of racist comments that he made against, you know, black people. But I still remember the day that they played, and they kind of had a soft protest. You know, I think they wanted to play with their jerseys inside out, but couldn't. But they ended up taking their shooting shirt that said Clippers on it and throw it in the middle of the floor, and their jersey said Los Angeles. So they thought that was their protest. But In fact, and I'll admit this, like when the game started, I was so disappointed that they played the game and I was covering the game that it actually like brought me to tears. Like it bothered me that much that they would actually play the game after that. And Adam Silver was the one, the commissioner, 2 days later, he ended up basically banning Donald Sterling for life. But I thought that the players lost a real big opportunity at that time to make a stance and say, hey, this isn't right and this shouldn't be tolerated.
Let me just shift gears a little bit here. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your work with the National Association for Black Journalists, and what, I guess specifically, what does the task force do? Is there anything students should know about it? And what's the importance of an organization like the NABJ or the NAHJ, for that matter, in today's media landscape?
Well, I kind of got to go back, and actually my first internship that I ever had was with San Jose Metro. It's a weekly newspaper. And I basically went in there after my sophomore year. This might be a tip that could help you guys. And I said, do you guys have anybody that writes sports stories? And they're like, no. And I said, can I do it for you for free? They're like, yeah. So I ended up writing sports stories for the San Jose Metro after my sophomore year. And that's when I first started getting some clips outside of the school. And that next summer, I applied for like 25 internships. I got one out of 25, and I was really nervous and scared that I wouldn't have anything that next summer after my junior year. The only internship I got was through the National Association of Black Journalists. And the internship was working at the Grand Rapids Press in Grand Rapids, Michigan, covering sports, and it was an amazing internship. I got to do a Cubs game. I got to go to a Lions event. I went to a thing they had then called the U.S. Olympic Festival, and I interviewed this boxer who at the time was like 18 years old, and he was so excited because he had all these juice boxes, and he had a whole carton, a whole thing, what are they called? Ice chest full of juice boxes. He's like, you want one or two? They're going to give me more juice boxes. It was Floyd Mayweather Jr. Like, at that time, he was excited about juice boxes, you know. So I got that major experience then, and after that, the San Jose Mercury News was like, you want to cover some high school football, some high school basketball for us? So because of that internship from the NABJ, in which they actually paid for me to go to the convention that summer, I was able to start getting work with the San Jose Mercury News while I was in college still. And that next summer, because of that internship, I ended up getting like 10 offers. And at that time, the Dallas Morning News had the best sports page in the U.S. in the mid-90s, and I ended up doing an internship with them. But I say all that to say that, you know, I always kind of feel indebted to the National Association of Black Journalists because they gave me my first paid internship. They made a light when nobody else made a light. And through that organization, I've been able to get mentors and friends, and been able to mentor people for, you know, it's almost like a fraternity/sorority that I'll be involved with for a lifetime. So my position is, I'm chair. I was elected 5 years ago, and I'm basically chair of all the sports journalists, black sports journalists involved, whether they're in the U.S. or Canada. You know, help with mentoring programs, help with, you know, finding jobs, being a shoulder to cry on. We had a colleague that lost his job due to plagiarism, trying to help him out best I can. But also, like, celebrate each other and just help each other grow in the business. And, you know, I feel like this organization helped me, so I got to help people up too. And I would certainly suggest, like, for anybody that's Hispanic here, like, join the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. For anybody that's Asian here, there's an Asian American Journalists Association who has basically patterned to get their own sports task force, but they're stealing all our ideas and making their own group. So even the APSC, like, it doesn't like matter. If you're white and you're black, join the black group. You know, join a group, join the APSC, join a group where it could help you move up the ladder in your world, in this business, because it's really, really hard to do it by yourself.
One thing that just occurred to me as you were saying that is, you know, I know that some students hear, like, you know, get a mentor and that sort of thing, and think that's a little intimidating. I mean, you're a guy with 326,000 followers on Twitter. Like, why should I, you know, like, what can I do to approach him that's going to, you know, like, have an impact kind of a deal? So, do you have any tips on actually approaching people? Is it just
you know what? If you're going to be a journalist in this business, you got to be aggressive. You know, if you see, like, the way I actually got the job in the college at the Sound City Mercury News was, there was a columnist named Bud Tracy who came to interview one of my teammates. I was like, wow, that's Bud Tracy, he's a big-time sports columnist from the Sound City Mercury News. And I just kind of waited till he was done with his interview, and then I went up to him, Mr. Tracy, my name's Marc Spears. Blah, blah, blah. Next thing I know, I'm taking high school football scores. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. You know, so if you're going to be in this business, you can't be shy. Shy people don't succeed in this business. So if there is a journalist that you follow, that you really care about, email them. Find an email. Send them a message if you can on Twitter. And people that do, send me an email, or, you know, one of your students, she sent me an email. I hit her back for a class. I mean, I think more people would hit you back than you think, but you gotta tap them on the shoulder. You have to try to contact them. And if they got any, I guess, pulse or soul or heart, they'll typically, no matter who they are, they'll get back to you.
And I've said this in class, I mean, you know, it's hard to find a journalist who doesn't like to talk about themselves in their career. You know?
Yeah.
Let me move on, and then maybe we'll start to open it up to the audience. But I wanted to ask you something I neglected to say in your introduction, is that you produced an award-winning documentary that was the story of the Superdome during the Katrina disaster, during Hurricane Katrina. And I wanted to ask you a couple things about that, how it came to be, and why you felt compelled to do this. And, you know, in a certain sense, that's you stretching beyond just sports to go to something bigger than sports. Yeah. So how did that come about, and why'd you feel compelled to do that? Was that a good experience for you?
The majority of my mom's family lives in New Orleans, and so New Orleans is like a second home to me. So when Katrina happened, it was devastating to me, it was devastating to my family. I have an uncle who I remember going to his property after it was gone, and you know, New Orleans people are great at finding humor in dark. And he said, "You want to buy some riverfront property?" They're like laughing at me. I wish I would have bought it now, but my mom and dad were one of the few people in my family that actually kept their house and didn't lose their house. My aunt lost her house. She still lives with my parents to this day. So it was something that was in my heart, and while Katrina was going on, it was painful to watch what was happening. And I actually covered the first NBA game back in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. It was the Lakers versus the Hornets. And one of my cousins was actually a New Orleans cop. He was doing security detail at the game, as he always does. And that was the first time I had seen him since Hurricane Katrina. And Phil Jackson had just spoken, and next thing I know, my cousins grabbed me, and you know, we hugged and we went to talk, and it was a very emotional conversation that we had, where he was basically telling me what happened. And we both kind of decided that we should document what he went through. So at that time I was working in Denver, I flew him to Denver, and my initial thing was to try to do a movie script. And I taped an interview with him. I got to the point where this is a tough, you know, strong, bulky cop, tough guy, and him talking about it. His wife later told me it was the first time he spoke about it. Like, he broke down and cried, telling me the whole story about just the pain that was going on in the Superdome. There were just a couple hundred cops, and there were like 30,000 people there. Money didn't mean nothing. There was rapes, there was murders. There are all kind of bad that happened. And he witnessed it. There was also a point where the cops had got clearance at one point where they thought that the people in the Superdome were going to try to overtake them, and they were given clearance to shoot and kill. It never got there, but just imagine if it could have got to the point where men, women, and children were slaughtered in the Superdome because some people decided to rampage because of lack of food, drink, or just something to sleep in. But so we ended up doing a documentary, and I ended up getting access into the Superdome with some people I knew. Got interviews through friends of mine. There was a Saints involvement as well, because the first event back in the Superdome was with the Saints. So we interviewed a former player, Steve Gleason, who blocked the punt. He's since had some horrible health issues, but so it was kind of a project of love. I haven't made 1 cent off of it, but I'm very proud of it. I put it on Facebook so people could watch it for free. Hopefully at some point it gets on Netflix, but it got about 10 film festivals, and it got one Best Documentary.
Do you feel like it stretched you as a reporter?
It was fun. I mean, the story wasn't fun, but the challenge was fun. Like, if it paid a lot more, I'd rather do that, but documentaries don't pay that well. I love storytelling, and that's something that, Kobe Bryant, like, that's his thing to do. His next thing is, don't be surprised if in the coming years there's all these amazing documentaries that come out from Kobe Bryant. I think he feels like it's his next calling. Not being in front of a microphone or, talking about basketball, but telling stories that affect the world. And, I have like 15 documentaries in my head that I love to do, but time and money certainly make it tough.
Let's see. If people have questions, you can come on up to the microphone, and we'll take them. And for right now.
Journalism students, right?
Yeah, I know. They got to get on it.
Shy journalism?
You told an interesting story last night about how your start.
Penn State, right? This is
It is. It's a Big Ten school.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just checking. Go ahead.
Told an interesting story last night, a little bit about just kind of talking about your own story about how good story for student journalists. How your start as a student journalist may have been the end of your career as a college basketball player. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share any of that.
Yeah, that was an interesting story. I actually played 2 years at a junior college called Foothill in Silver by Stanford University. Then I got a scholarship to a predominantly black school called the District of Columbia in Washington, D.C. Played there for a year. The academics weren't that good, so I transferred to San Jose State. I was promised by the coach, who didn't have any scholarships, and I grew up a huge San Jose State fan. It's like somebody who's from this area probably is a Penn State fan. I grew up a huge San Jose State fan, and would have meant the world to me to play there. And I was a redshirt. During my redshirt year, I blew up my knee. The year I'd sit out, and then I had 1 year of eligibility left. Well, I wrote this article about the lack of black college basketball lack of black college basketball coaches. At that time, there were 3 major coaches who sat out a game, but it was against like Appalachian State, Sisters of the Poor, whatever. So it was a game that players could have won without them. So I wrote this column basically like killing the coaches, saying if they really want to make an impression, do this against a Kentucky. Do this in the NCAA tournament, do this in the league tournament. In fact, I think all black college basketball players, a little military, I guess, all black college basketball players should sit out a game to boycott the lack of black college basketball coaches at the time. This was 93. Next day, the assistant coach of San Jose State brought me to his office. He was the only coach on staff who was black. And he said, we didn't really like that you wrote this story. I said, why? He said, well, it's not a representation of what this program is about. And I said, "You're black, right?" He's like, "Yeah." I said, "Don't you want a job? Don't you want to be a head coach one day?" "Well, yeah." I said, "Well, I'm trying to help you." Right? And he kind of didn't know what to say. I said, "Look, I'm not on scholarship. I pay my own way. I do everything you guys ask me to do. But one thing I'm not going to compromise is what I write." They didn't like it. The head coach after that started calling me Marcus Aurelius. Treated me different. I noticed all of a sudden I was treated different. And despite being promised a spot on a team without a non-scholarship spot on the team, suddenly when I came back from my knee injury, you got to try out. But when I came here, you told me, well, we changed the rules. You got to try out now. So the day I got cleared, the day after I got cleared from my knee surgery, I had to try out for the team. I hadn't even played in months. I had ACL surgery. I go in and I played in this tryout as if my life depended on it. It was ridiculous. But I saw what they were doing. But I ended up, and this is from accounts that I got from others, playing better than everybody on one knee. And the next day, the coach told one of my teammates, "Hey, you made the team." At a event with boosters. So I was like, well, if he made the team, he said there's only one non-scholarship spot, that means I didn't make the team. So I went up to the coach and I said, "Hey, sounds like you already chose who you wanted." He said, "Yeah. Yeah, we decided to take this other guy." And I said, "So I wasn't selected?" He said, "No, we think your knee is too messed up. It's better that you not play because of your knee." So the coach ended my college basketball career because my quote-unquote knee was too bad, which was, to me, a decision that I should make. And which was devastating. I never got to play that game there. I didn't get what I was promised. And in my heart, I truly believe it's because of the article I wrote that the assistant coach talked to me about, not the head coach, but the head coach was obviously upset about it. And that was his revenge. But then the next year, when graduation time came, I got a letter from San Jose State's athletic department saying, "Hey, congratulations on graduating and come to the San Jose State athletic department breakfast to honor all our athletes," which basically told me that they counted me in their graduation nights.
That's an amazing story. Question?
Hi, I'm in John's sports business class, and so this is, I guess, more related to sports business, but how, or if at all, is the NBA's TV deal with Turner and ESPN impacting your job?
That was a great question. We talked about that yesterday. I was really hoping that Fox and NBC and somebody else could get a piece of that. Because what it did was ESPN and Turner Sports had the first right of refusal on keeping the NBA. And there was some talk that Fox or NBC could take over Saturday night. Like they just wanted Saturday night, which has since become an ABC thing. Now you see NBC on Saturday night. But had Fox or NBC, had they been able to get it, then there would have been a slew of jobs that would have opened up as far as NBA is concerned, whether it was on air, their websites, or whatever. So it would have been great for the business had one of those other TV corporations got it, and they would have did Saturday night. ESPN basically took that idea. They had first right of refusal. They which gave these crazy amount of money from Turner and ESPN to keep the NBA, which now is going to skyrocket the NBA players' contracts. But from a selfish standpoint, I was hoping that NBC or Fox were going to get in, because then there probably would have been an additional, I don't know, 20 to 30 jobs or even more in the business from an NBA standpoint.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You talked a little bit about when that came up when we were talking. There was you talked a little bit about access and how access has changed or is changing. Can you describe that at all?
Well, I mean, I kind of feel You know, I'm a little worried about the future. When I first started covering the NBA, we had courtside seats. Those courtside seats actually have people in it. Not like they sell them.
Yeah.
Our seats are getting further up
Yeah.
to the point now we might be watching it from satellite dish somewhere else soon in a small room. And so to me, I think it's a disservice to the reader because there's so much color and so much more passion in writing we could get if we were closer, but they keep pushing us up higher, but obviously ESPN and Turner, they get a lot of choice seats, but the other media do not. So we used to get 45 minutes in the locker room for years before games. When I first started covering the NBA, I could watch an entire practice. Now you get to wink, 15 minutes at the end of practice. Now the locker room is closed a half an hour, and the players are complaining about that access, which is just ridiculous to me because I know they have a game, but ultimately if you talk for 3 minutes, that's about it. LeBron pretty much does it before every game. The last 2 to 5 minutes, and he's done. It's not a hard thing to do, but I guess there are some players that have complained about media just standing around the locker room where other players weren't hiding and they talked and we wouldn't be standing around. You know, we're waiting on certain people, but my fear is that access is going to keep getting cut back and to the point where it's going to make it really hard to do our jobs. And I think because of Twitter, in a lot of ways, because of what people say on Twitter, they're being more protective. I could do it, if you interview, say, somebody with the New York Knicks, there'll be a PR person next to you with a tape recorder recording what you're asking. The Oklahoma City Thunder are known for Kevin Durant's talk for 2 minutes. Okay, last question. It's 2 minutes in. What you mean last question? 2 minutes in. Someone from the Rockets is known for listening in on your interview, like in a kind of a way where the Thunder do this as well, where it could be intimidating to the player or to the person interviewing because Big Brother's listening. You know, so fortunately it's like changing for the worse. And we were just at this last All-Star week, you know, the Professional Black Writers Association met, and they want to cut our access even more.
I have 2 questions. My first question is, as an African-American writer, how do you stand out and prove like the statistics and the naysayers wrong throughout your career? And you want me to give you the second question?
Well, I guess I can answer that. Well, speaking like in the NBA, you see how I don't wear ties. I did wear my Nittany shirt for you guys though, but I'm not a tie person, but this is like the typical dress of, say, a black NBA reporter. And the reason being is, you know, we kind of tell each other, like, you got to dress professional, you got to dress nice, in a lot of ways, so people respect you when you walk in the door. There's kind of some feeling from some of the younger, like NBA writers, that they may not be respected by the general managers or by ownership. You know, they're not going to come in there. When he picked me up from the airport yesterday, I had a hoodie on and some sweats. But there's no way that I would dress like that at the game. One, because I'm bougie like that, but 2, I think it's important to dress professionally because we want somebody to sadly respect us when we walk in the door, and our other counterparts typically don't dress as nice. But, you know, I think another thing is, you know, Spurs coach Greg Popovich told me that I'm fair. Like he said, the one thing about you, I know you're fair. You don't have a hidden agenda. I'm not trying to get some quick scoop to raise my name. I think if you do good reporting, your name will rise. I used to play, so that helps. And I think it's important to know everybody from the. I could talk to a CEO or owner of a team, or I could talk to one of the players' boys that used to be a drug dealer and can communicate them comfortably the same way. So I think that helps me. I just try to be a regular person. I also demand respect. I'm not going to let a player disrespect me. I don't care if it's LeBron James or whoever. So, in all that, but having years in the business builds respect. Getting players to be comfortable, open up, gets respect, because once one player is open talking to you, then the next player. So, I mean, everybody's different, but I think being a people person, a hard-working reporter, not taking any shortcuts, and just not doing something stupid, has really helped my life.
Also, I was curious to know, like, who do you look up to in the industry, like, now, in the past, like, what helped build you up?
I think probably, as far as the person I look at, David Aldridge from Turner Sports is like a big brother to me. He actually just was put in the Hall of Fame. I'm very happy for him. Super nice guy, will give you the shirt off his back, never an ego. And so he's kind of, there are some other journalists that unfortunately, because they're on TV or because they're on the radio or because they're a star where they are, or maybe a star nationally, kind of got to their head and they forgot where they came from and they think they're a superstar like a ball player. David Aldridge will never be that way, and I'll never be that way. I might run my mouth a little bit, but I ain't no better than nobody else. You know what I mean? I'll never act like I'm somebody special because I got some Twitter followers or this and that. You know what I mean? It's my job. And like David will show you that it's important that just because I made it, I haven't forgotten who's behind me. He's always reaching down and grabbing somebody up. And it could be me if I need to talk. It could be somebody that's in high school that's thinking about being a journalist. And so I think for me, with the NABJ, the thing that's disappointing is there are a share of black journalists who they've made it, so I'm forgetting about everybody else. I got mine. I'm good. Y'all figure it out. And that bothers me. But like, to me, like David Aldridge and Bill Rhoden, he's a columnist from the New York Times, he's writing a lot of great pieces. He's like the godfather. Bill Rhoden calls me, like if he called me right now, I say, hey, Bill, it's Bill Rhoden calling me. You know, then Kerry Howard used to be the first black president of the APSC. I mean, I could probably go on and on, but you know, David is probably the king of all of them to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There was a incident in Atlanta a couple years ago. It may have cost the owner a position with some racially insensitive emails that he talked about. But I'm more interested in actually the underlying problem than the particular owner. And racism, which was the perception that it's a real challenge to market effectively in urban environments to affluent African American consumers and affluent white consumers, and in particular the allegation was in the South.
Yeah.
I wonder what your observations are about both the Atlanta situation and in general. Is this real? Is it blown up? How can clubs in diverse environments, are clubs successful in some diverse environments that you would hold up as a model? And how can you, they're interested in making a lot of money, and how can you do that to attract the maximum amount of support from a diverse urban audience?
Well, I think in Atlanta's case, you know, you almost got to kind of do things in a reverse way. I mean, Atlanta's like, to me, a predominantly black town. And so you can't just cater to a black crowd. Being around Golden State, like they do the best, unfortunately, sadly, like what I think needs to be done is they make sure like their cheerleading team, their dance team is very diverse. There's somebody from every ethnicity in there. The music they play, they'll play Too Short's Blow the Whistle, because that's a Bay Area anthem. And then they'll play Guns N' Roses. Like, so through the course of the game, they play something that everybody likes. But the ultimate thing is they all love the Warriors. You know, so you do a little bit of this and that, so everybody has something that they can taste that tastes good to them, that they're attracted to. And I think that's where Atlanta made the mistake is you gotta see who your fan base is and cater to everybody. You can't. So I think there was a perception like, well, you go to Atlanta's game, it's like a hip hop show. And perhaps maybe there was something behind people feeling that way, because every time I see at halftime, it's Ludacris performing or T.I. performing or somebody like that. So I think it was probably important to them, where they might have made a mistake, is, you know, mix in some other genres of music as well to cater to the non-hip hop crowd. You know, I know black people that don't like hip hop, you know, so, or older group. My mom don't like hip hop. She don't want to see Naughty by Nature perform at halftime, you know, so I think that's kind of where the NBA probably could do a better job of using, say, Clippers with their diverse dance team and the way they do things, or like cities that are more diverse, I think do a better job of catering to everybody because they have to. And ultimately, everybody at a Warriors game, regardless of race, feels great and comfortable. The team being great doesn't hurt, but they do a good job. Like, it's funny, like I go to Indiana, it's like a lot of country music playing, you know, or you go to Atlanta, there's a lot of hip hop playing, whereas I think Golden State in LA, they do a great job of making everybody feel like, you know, we're going to do what everybody likes. It's a buffet, you know.
How has the media gotten better in terms of covering stories involving race in sports, if you've noticed anything? And what is something they still struggle with to this day, or that they can do better on?
When the ESPN's Undefeated comes out, I think that'll be interesting to see, you know, what they do as far as covering blacks in sports and stuff like that.
Let me just hold you up, just in case you don't know. The Undefeated is, I mean, it was called by the guy who was going to found it, the Black Brain. It's basically the black perspective on sports, and we have mutual friends who work there, and they're about to launch this year.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that will have an impact, but I just think that all reporters should be able to, if there's a female injustice, it should be written about. If it's Asian injustice, it should be written about. If it's white injustice, it should be written about it. My job as a reporter is to tell the story, the real story. Regardless of what I am, I have to be objective, you know. The only thing I'm not objective about in sports is Raiders. I'm a Raiders season ticket holder. I don't cover the NFL. So you talk bad about my Raiders, I might get mad, and there's a lot of bad to talk about. But when it comes to the NBA, as a reporter, you're supposed to be objective regardless to race. But I think you have to be sensitive to everybody's race. And even with, you know, another topic we should probably talk about is, you know, female reporters and what they have to deal with and what I've seen through the years. And I'm very sensitive to making sure female reporters feel comfortable. And for a lot of you guys getting into this, ladies, it's tough. Us guys are assholes in a lot of ways. You know, stuff that we can say and what we can do and what athletes do and what you have to endure. It's really embarrassing at times. But I think it's gotten a lot better. But ultimately, objectivity is important, regardless of who you are, male, female, green, blue, red.
So do you deal with the same amount / type of racism that you dealt with when you were just starting out in journalism? Or do you find like that as you climbed your way up in the field, it's changed or come from a different group of people? Or
I think perhaps I have a lot more power now than when I first started. When I remember covering the Angels, there was a general manager named Bill Pavesi. He used to talk down to me, dog me out. Never anything racist that was said, but you could kind of feel it. And there was a reporter, a veteran reporter, who made a point to tell him to stop. You know, leave Marc alone, what you're doing is wrong. At that time, I was too young. Fast forward to later, you know, I think I was telling you guys earlier that, you know, first press conference I had with LeBron James was when Carmelo Anthony and LeBron played against each other for the first time. And LeBron, I asked LeBron about a guy named Earl Boykins who stole the show in Cleveland, his hometown, at the best game. And LeBron goes, I asked LeBron, I said, what do you think about Earl Boykins stealing the show? And he said, well, what do you think? And I said, nobody cares what I think. That's why I'm asking you. You know, so, but that's something I wouldn't have said earlier in my career. Later in my career, I was more confident. I didn't care who he was. They're going to respect me on my job, respect me as a man. And LeBron was black. But I do think now that if there is anything that I deal with, it's more from a hidden variety. It's nothing in my face. And, you know, I think they know that anything overt, I'm going to say something and certainly make a point about it. Thank you.
I'm a longtime Philadelphia fan. I just want to get your input. What do you think of
What's the team?
The
Sixers?
Yeah, what's your thought on the Sixers process, and what does the league think about
That's a
it?
good question.
Pray. Lots of prayer. No, there is hope. They hired a guy, hired Jerry Colangelo, former Suns owner, executive, and he also runs USA Basketball. And until he came along, the Sixers were a sunken ship that was just falling apart. Now the pieces have gotten back together and it's actually starting to float. So there is hope for the Sixers, I think, because of Jerry Colangelo.
What's your opinion on tanking, I guess?
The what?
The idea of tanking. Like, losing
The idea of
tanking.
It's dumb. It's a lottery. So even if you have the worst record, that doesn't guarantee you the top pick. And then they've gotten good picks, and then they trade guys. Like where they have a guy named Sark, who I think is really good, but he's overseas, collecting dust. He's not helping the team at all, so that was a dumb draft pick. Even though he might be able to help him, he basically lost him for like 2 or 3 years. So it is like, okay, when are you going to make these picks come into fruition? And so I think it's not like Sixers or Utah or Milwaukee in a small market. Philadelphia is a big major market with success and history, is a great organization. So they just destroyed, I think, a great product and made it where star players don't want to go there. Hopefully Colangelo can change it. And you drafted 3 centers in a row. A position they're trying to phase out.
I just wanted to ask you about, your sources as a reporter and a journalist. How do you, I guess, early on in your career, build trust with people to end up making sources where you can call them if you need something for an article? And then how do you maintain those relationships with players or coaches, general managers?
I think every year it gets easier and easier because I have more and more years, and now I'm getting old enough where there's players I covered that read me as kids. So they're like, oh, yeah. So it's a little easier to get their phone number. It's a little easier to get their email. Which I was saying earlier, I think that's when you're first trying to get sources from players as source, try email. A lot of times they're a little uptight about giving up their phone number. When you have somebody for their email, one good thing about that, emails rarely change. Players change their numbers all the time. 2, it's like a little less intrusive to them, and then once you build a relationship, you can get the phone number. Like Tony Parker, for example, I have a good relationship with him, and he made sure that last time I saw him that I had his new phone number. But that's something I built. But for example, even as great as a relationship I have a good relationship with Kobe Bryant, I got his email. He used to contact me on my email, but the email doesn't change. So as long as there's some mode of me contacting people, that's great. So, but it comes with time. I certainly have much more sources now than the beginning, and it's interesting when you see new reporters come in, like all the people with power that have news to give to guys who be sources. They're a little tentative about saying too much to somebody new. You kind of got to get your stripes. You got to get their trust, and they think that the new people want to make a name for themselves and break news so bad that they better be careful because they might get burned trusting some new guy coming in. So it takes time.
You also, in conversations with me, have talked a little bit about developing players just as they come into the league. And maybe you can describe that, because that sort of also speaks to your point of like the catch-22 of you have to have experience to get the source, but how do you get the experience?
Well, I think as far as the young journalists here, like, if you're writing about the athletes here, you guys are in classes with them, you break bread with them, you're at a frat party with them. You guys should be killing the local newspaper on stories. You got better access than anybody. And they probably bitch and complain to you guys about stuff all the time. Man, coach suspended so-and-so because he did what? Oh, can I write that? Well, you didn't get that from me, okay? You know, I mean, and that's basically how it works. You guys have great access to some future pro athletes, to some local stars, and, you know, take advantage of it. And oftentimes it's not the star on the team. You know, get to know the walk-ons, get to know the team manager. There's always somebody that wants to talk, especially the guy that nobody wants to talk to. He always has a lot to say. So, like, I'll get to know the athletic director, and I'll get to know the person that's sweeping the floor. Why do I care about the janitor? Well, the janitor is there when somebody gets thrown out of the game and they come running out and they say something crazy. Or the janitor is there when that recruit comes in and walks by, or that new coach that they're trying to sneak in the interview comes in. He sees everything. So that's kind of a lot of times, a lot of my sources could be obscure sources. I remember one year when I was covering Denver Nuggets, I had one guy that nobody thought would ever say a word. He was telling me everything. He got traded and it broke my heart. He got traded because he was telling me everything. When I was covering the University of Louisville, they had a guy on the team who I had known. I was 4 years older than him, but we played in an all-star basketball camp together. I was breaking every story on Louisville basketball. He was telling me everything. So you got, as reporters, like, it's kind of like a game. Like, when something's happening, I sit there and think, okay, who can I get some information from? Oh, this general manager, he's not going to tell me nothing. So I'm not going to waste my time with this. But this scout might know. Like every team, I have people that I will go to. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it's too late. Sometimes they're right on time. And you know, you get that scoop. And like one big story in Warriors land was they just made a trade to get Verjao. But the next thing is, okay, who are they going to cut? And there was a lot of chatter on Twitter immediately, because Twitter's like this. Who are they going to cut? And then I found out who was being cut. It was Jason Thompson. And as soon as I tweeted it out, that actually got more hits than the actual trade, because the trade was expected. And there was a guy, you know, he doesn't always come through, but he came through that one time. So you just, it's all a gamble. I've walked into stories that were blockbusters, and then I thought I'd had blockbusters in my hand, was about to push the send button on Twitter, and somebody else had it 30 seconds before. But it's truly about all about who you know and who will tell you something, and you'd be surprised. Like, we walked through the Penn State basketball office today. They got a chef. Somebody's passing out food to the players. I can try to figure out if I was here who that is, because they hear everything. So try to be creative with, you know, your sources, and always the less than obvious source can sometimes be your best one.
So, out of curiosity, do you believe that people in the sports industry is afraid to address the idea that racism still exists? If so, why do you think that is, and how, as a journalism, do you get them to talk about it?
I think there is a lot of fear of somebody saying the wrong thing. I got to be a little careful about what I say, because I say one wrong thing here, I can get fired. You know, that's just the way of our business now, because, you know, she's taping it. I know she's taping it. I see her. Somebody here might be sending, but I think I'm pretty much saying how I feel. But oftentimes, like the statistics I showed you, that there are a lack of black columnists. So if the majority of the columnists are white and they don't want to talk about it, then it doesn't get heard. The ESPN, I give them credit, has done a good job of talking about race, and it saddens me that people get so nervous talking about it. If the situation is what it is, that doesn't mean you're racist because you're white, and I think, I don't know you. You might help more black people than anybody I know. I don't know. I don't assume anything. But the numbers are what the numbers are, and until I think there's more people of color telling stories, maybe it's easier for it to be talked about, but it could be because somebody's like, man, I'm just scared of saying the wrong thing. You know, and so I'd rather, maybe that's why a lot of my white colleagues aren't really talking about the lack of diversity in general managers, because maybe they're afraid of saying the wrong thing and offending somebody. We have a great columnist named Dan Wetzel at Yahoo, some of you may read. And if there is something that is racially sensitive sometimes, he will call me and say, well, what do you think? What do you think? I'm like, man, black people don't care about that, go ahead. And, but I respect the fact that he has the mentality of like to think, well, let me check and let me see, but he's not scared to talk about it, and I wish more were like Dan Wetzel.
We're, come on, Jay, but we're getting sort of close to the magic 75-minute mark of our session, so we may have this question. I've got one follow-up, and then we'll wrap it up. But we'll still be here if you want to come over and talk. So, Shay.
It's really fast.
No, take your time.
Well, it's just really simple, but so like as a young journalist reporter starting out, how long did it take you to like get your bearing in the field and not be like petrified to talk to these like huge name stars or like work on a deadline? Like how long did it take for you to feel completely 100% comfortable doing what you do?
I think one of the things for me that, because I played college basketball, even though it was on a super high level, I never was really nervous. You know, actually when I mentioned I worked for that weekly newspaper, my first interview with a pro athlete was with Tim Hardaway, played for the Warriors back in like '92. And I was nervous, you know, because that was my first interview with a pro athlete. And then after that, I was mad at myself for being nervous. And I never was nervous again. You got to remember, these are human beings. I don't care what their name is. Who would I get nervous about? I don't even think I get nervous talking to Obama. I just more be nervous about my preparation, being ready, asking smart questions. I think that's what you should be nervous about. Their title, who they are. You got to throw that, whatever fandom you have, out the door. There's athletes that have jerks that I don't know if I really want to talk to them, you know, personally, but I got to do my job. So it's like funny because sometimes I'll have one of my friends along, and I'll tell you real quick. I went to the Super Bowl with my girlfriend, and I'll tell you all this, but we walked out, and Steph Curry walks out at the same time, and his wife, and his body, like a Warrior security guard and a guy from Under Armour. And he walks up, and I'm talking to him, and my girlfriend's just over here, and she's just like nervous, and I'm like, come here. Like I had to tell her, like, it's Aisha Curry. You know? And I got to remind myself sometimes that, you know, my friends, like I had an interview, sit down with Steph, and one of my buddies came, and he was like, can I get a picture with him? Like, I got to remember that they're not in my field, and so they are excited to meet new people or whatever, and I'm jaded because of the interviews I've gotten through the years. But you guys got to become jaded too. Like, inside, maybe you're dancing, you know, but outside it's like, I got to do my job, I got to do my interview, I don't care what kind of level they're on, I gotta ask them a tough question. You know, but I always say that there's a way to ask a question. There's always a way to ask a question, and even the tough questions. There's a way not to be a jerk. There's a way to act at anything intelligently. And if you come prepared, to me, that's what I'm nervous about. Like coming in here, I was most nervous about, okay, which route I go. And I must have asked them about 10 times, like I'm trying to figure out what to say, what to do. And I don't want to be preachy, even though I probably am preachy. But if you're prepared and you're ready to go, I don't care who it is. You just ask a question. They know when the people that get run over, the ones that they see are kind of like excited or intimidated by them.
Yeah.
And the ones that drive me nuts is, don't become no fanboy when you're doing an interview. Like people that are fanboys when they're doing interviews, like just, that's not, you got to be credentialed because you're a professional journalist. You can't go there with your Penn State gear on to cover Penn State basketball. You're there to ask questions. And the tough spot is you might have to ask a tough question to a guy you got a class with the next day or a woman you got a class with the next day. But if they have a bad game, you got to ask them. You know what I mean? And kind of almost put your allegiance to the school side to ask that tough question.
So last thing, we've talked a lot about a lot of different things today, and I just thought you had some great words to say to people who are seniors, and we're now, 10 weeks from graduation, and they're going to get ready for their next move, about what to do when you get out of school, and the kind of attitude you need to bring to where you're going.
For you guys that are seniors, and actually for you guys I'll start with the underclassmen real quick. Sure. Get as many internships as possible. Get as much experience as possible, even if it's free. Nobody asks you when they look at your resume how much you got paid for that internship. They want to know what kind of experience you have. So the one key thing that I had by the time I graduated, I felt like I was a first-round draft pick because I had interned at 3 places. I'd written for the San Jose Mercury News. I got an awards. In my first job, I was covering the University of Arkansas's football and basketball team for the Tulsa paper. Typically coming out of college, most people do like get the high school sports or this and that, but I got to cover a Southeastern Conference team right out of college. I didn't get paid nothing. I got $19,000 before taxes. So if you come in here, if you really want to be a journalist, you're not going to make any money at the beginning. Just know that. I'm sorry. And it's okay. I made $19,000 before taxes. I remember it was so bad one time my girlfriend got me some groceries on food stamps when I was in Tulsa, and I thought about working at McDonald's for a second. And I was making money off mileage. Like that was important to give a little extra money off mileage. But what I realized, the best thing to me was to go to Tulsa. I was a Bay Area kid. I'm used to big things, bright lights. And I went to Tulsa, Oklahoma, the countryest place I've ever been in my life. And I was allowed to make mistakes, and it wasn't the end of the world. So I know a lot of you want to go to ABC tomorrow, you want to go to ESPN tomorrow, you want to go to Sports Illustrated tomorrow, you want to go to Time Magazine tomorrow, or the New York Times tomorrow. You're not ready. Go somewhere small, make mistakes, and it not be the end of the world. I was terrible. I made a lot of mistakes in my copy when I first came out, and there was I told you, a one-armed man named Bob Colvin, who I owe my life to. If somebody tells me Bob Colvin needs $100, I'm calling him right now with $200. Bob Colvin was a one-armed copy editor, and he would sit with me twice a week with my poor copy and fix it for me. Why did he do it? I was at a smaller place where they took time. They wanted you to improve, and they're used to a lot of people coming in and out. So if you get a job offer in Montana out of here, take it. If you get a job offer in Idaho, Alaska, take it. Because you want to grow in this business, you want to get better, you want to make mistakes and it not be the end of the world and get fired. I've seen young journalists who skyrocketed too fast and now they're out of the business because they couldn't handle it. So going to Tulsa was great for me. So I just implore you guys that it's okay to leave home, get out the nest, get away from home, try something different, try a new environment. Because in this business, I worked in Tulsa, LA, Louisville, Kentucky, Dallas, Boston. I've jumped around, Denver, and I have friends all over the country. I have great experiences. I've covered the Olympics. Went all over the world. And it's all because of this business. And I make a lot more than that $19,000 I made before. I'm doing okay now. I got a decent car and some nice suits. Real estate is real, it's not easy to live in the Bay Area right now, but I can afford it. But I'm proud of it because I worked hard to get it. But my foundation was the bottom, and I started from the bottom down here, right? So it's true. And but if you think that you're just gonna like jump to the top at ESPN or jump to the top to the New York Times, you're mistaken. If you really want to be a star in this business, and all you guys can make big money in this business, if you pay your dues and just don't, when you graduate, you have to apply. I want any of you that graduate to apply for 30 jobs. Idaho, New Mexico, Canada, I don't care. Anything that fits you entry level, just apply. It's going to hit. One of them's going to hit. Somebody's going to give you a chance. And do not be afraid to go and spread your wings. And, eventually you'll get to the mountaintop, even though you got to start at the bottom first.
Thank you so much, Mark. Let's give him a hand.
Is it goal lines?